The gavel didn't fall. It struck. The sharp crack of wood on wood was a gunshot in the cathedral-like silence of the courtroom, a sound of absolute final authority. All eyes were fixed on the woman standing before the bench. She was 68 years old, but stood with the ramrod posture of a soldier, her dignity an invisible shield. Her hands, elegant and unadorned, rested on the polished lectern, not for support, but as if claiming the space as her own. Behind the simple frames of her glasses, her eyes were the color of a winter sky, clear, calm, and missing nothing. She was not defiant. She was not afraid. She was patient, a deep, glacial patience, carved from a lifetime of knowing she was on the right side of history. Judge Julian Croft leaned forward, the fabric of his black robe rustling. A smirk, razor-thin and venomous, played at the corners of his mouth. He lived for these moments, the electric pause before the sentence, the crushing weight of his power settling over the room. "Professor Reed," he began, his voice oiled with false deference, each syllable a deliberate cold stone dropped into a still pond. "You are hereby found in contempt, a fine of $1,000 for disrupting the sanctity of these proceedings." A wave of shock rippled through the gallery. $1,000. For what? For entering quietly. For being delayed by a security lockdown she had no control over. Even those who didn't recognize her name felt the icy finger of injustice trace a line down their spines. But no one moved. No one spoke. Not in Croft's kingdom. Here verdicts were not delivered. They were inflicted. Professor Evelyn Reed did not even blink. She took a slow, measured breath, the kind one takes before diving into deep water. "Your Honor," she said, her voice soft, but carrying to the furthest corner of the room, "I believe there has been a profound misinterpretation of my presence here today." Croft's eyebrow arched in mock surprise. "A misinterpretation?" He echoed, the sneer in his voice, now undisguised. "You entered my courtroom after the session began. You took a seat as if this were a cinema. Intentions are a luxury for poets, Professor. The law, as you, of all people, should recall from your dusty textbooks, is absolute." Evelyn gave a slow, deliberate nod, as if he had just confirmed a sad but predictable hypothesis. "I understand," she replied, her quietness a stark contrast to his booming arrogance. From a worn leather satchel, she produced a simple wallet, and with painstaking precision began counting out the bills. One by one. Crisp, exact, 10 $100 bills. She laid them on the lectern like a funeral wreath. The room held its breath. Satisfied, Judge Croft leaned back the leather of his chair, groaning in protest. "Next case," he barked, but a voice sharp and steady sliced through the air. "Your Honor." It came from the back of the courtroom. A young woman in a charcoal suit stood tall, her eyes burning holes into the bench. "I believe you should be aware of who it is you just silenced." Croft's smirk finally vanished. Evelyn didn't turn. She remained a statue of composure as a wildfire of murmurs swept the room. Heads craned, whispers grew into a frantic buzz. Who was she? Why did her quiet presence suddenly feel like the calm at the center of a gathering hurricane? The answer, one, the judge would soon regret not knowing, was about to detonate the foundations of his carefully constructed empire. Before we unravel this shocking conspiracy, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you crave stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. The marble floors of the Boston Federal Courthouse echoed with the solitary rhythmic click of low heels. Each step was deliberate, betraying nothing. Professor Evelyn Reed, wrapped in a long charcoal overcoat with a silk scarf tied neatly at her throat, moved through the cavernous halls with a quiet authority that made armed guards instinctively step aside. She hadn't set foot in this building in 15 years, not since she retired from her celebrated tenure at Harvard Law, where her lectures on judicial ethics were the stuff of legend. She moved now like a phantom returning to an old haunting, not out of sentiment, but out of a grim sense of duty. She hadn't planned to enter a courtroom ever again. Her days of fighting were done, but that morning, an encrypted message had arrived from a former student, Maya Singh, now a fiery public defender. The message was a desperate plea for her to attend a bail hearing that had, in Maya's words, gone dark. At first, Evelyn had ignored it. Her chapter was closed. But a familiar unease, a ghost of righteous anger she hadn't felt in years, began to stir. So she found herself at the courthouse entrance at 9:35 a.m., only to be halted by a sudden security lockdown and unscheduled drill. By the time she was cleared, it was 9:54. Inside courtroom 4B, the proceedings were well underway. Evelyn slipped in, hoping to remain unnoticed in the cavernous space. But this was a room ruled by an iron will, and under the gavel of Judge Julian Croft, nothing and no one went unnoticed. Tall, with a mane of silver hair and a suit that cost more than most people's cars, Croft was a man whose reputation was built on two pillars: unnerving charm and absolute terror. He spotted Evelyn the moment she took a seat. "Excuse me," he boomed his voice, silencing the low courtroom hum. "Has this court suddenly become a waiting room for the chronically late?" Evelyn rose with measured grace, her eyes locking onto his. They hadn't faced each other in 2 decades, not since he was a guest lecturer at Harvard, a man she remembered as brilliant, ambitious, and utterly devoid of a moral compass. Time, it seemed, had only sharpened his flaws. "My apologies, Your Honor," she said, her voice calm. "I received a message from the defense counsel requesting my observation. I assumed—" "You assumed wrong?" He snapped a flicker of something personal in his eyes. "This is not a lecture hall for you to grace with your presence, Professor Reed." The title hung in the air, charged and heavy. Gasps, small but audible, rippled through the gallery. Whispers coiled through the pews. "Is that Evelyn Reed?" The Evelyn Reed. Near the defense table, Maya Singh felt her blood run cold. Evelyn Reed, the woman who had single-handedly shaped her understanding of justice, the mentor who taught her that law without empathy is merely a weapon, was being publicly eviscerated. "I see your reputation precedes you," Croft said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It does not, however, exempt you from decorum. I am issuing a citation for contempt. $1,000. Bailiff, see to it." The bailiff, a man caught between procedural duty and genuine reverence for the woman before him, hesitated. Evelyn's face remained a mask of placid composure. She gave the briefest of nods. "Of course." Croft seemed almost disappointed by her lack of protest. "No rebuttal, Professor. No impassioned speech on the First Amendment." Evelyn turned her head slightly, her gaze as steady as granite. "I am not here to perform your honor, but I will say this. Power is not a license for cruelty." The entire room went still. You could hear the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Croft's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a predatory whisper. "Then perhaps you should have stayed in retirement." The bailiff reluctantly handed her the citation. She tucked it into her satchel with the same unhurried elegance she might use to fold a napkin. Maya couldn't breathe. The moment the hearing recessed, she darted into the hallway. Evelyn was already leaving, her pace measured, but Maya caught her just as she reached the grand stone steps outside. "Professor Reed, wait." Evelyn turned, a flicker of recognition warming her eyes. "Maya Singh, I remember your final moot court argument. You were the only student I ever saw quote Justice Brandeis while fighting back tears. You still won." Maya smiled, a brief, genuine flash before her expressions hardened. "What just happened in there?" "He humiliated you. That was personal." Evelyn looked down at the citation in her hand. "It's far more than personal, Maya. He's sending a message, marking his territory." Maya's eyes narrowed. "I think you're right. There have been rumors for months. Strange case diversions, sealed dockets that vanish. Defendants being railroaded into plea deals behind closed doors." Evelyn's gaze sharpened, the retired academic suddenly replaced by the keen legal mind that had once been legendary. "Show me," she said, her voice steel. "Not here, tomorrow, my house, 7 a.m., and bring coffee, the strong kind." The next morning, Maya stood before a massive oak dining table in Evelyn's Beacon Hill brownstone. The table was buried under a mountain of documents, old law reviews, handwritten notes, and the case transcripts Maya had brought. Evelyn, now in a simple cashmere sweater and reading glasses, exuded a quiet, focused energy. She flipped through a docket sheet. "Croft's sentencing averages are nearly double the state mandate for similar offences," she murmured. "His discretionary fines, my God, they account for over half of this courthouse's annual operating budget." She tapped a line on a financial summary Maya had managed to pull. "The Judicial Advancement Fund." Sounds noble, doesn't it?" Maya nodded, her stomach twisting. "Follow the money," Evelyn instructed. "The fund is managed by a firm called Lexwell Strategies, incorporated 20 months ago, registered to a P.O. box in Delaware." She swiveled to an old laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "And its sole listed director, Silas Thorne, Croft's law school roommate, and coincidentally, a name that appears in at least 3 sealed whistleblower lawsuits in other states." Maya sank into a chair, the weight of it all pressing down on her. "I had no idea it was this orchestrated," she whispered. Evelyn leaned back, her fingers steepled. "That's because it's not just corruption, Maya. It's a protection racket disguised as a courtroom. He finds the dissenters, silences the vulnerable, and preys on those who can't afford a voice. He's been building this kingdom for years." "But why?" Maya asked. "Power," Evelyn said simply, "and leverage. You overfine one person, they complain to a newspaper. You do it to 1,000 people a year. You build a slush fund that no one dares question. If we expose this," Evelyn held up a hand. "Not yet. You think a man this meticulous hasn't insulated himself. We need irrefutable proof. And for that, we need someone on the inside. Someone with access to the prosecution's sealed records. Someone who isn't afraid of the consequences." Maya looked up, her heart pounding. "I know someone. Leo Nolan, assistant DA. He was in your ethics seminar too. He's been asking questions lately, quietly." Evelyn nodded, a grim smile touching her lips. "Reach out to him, but be careful. The moment Croft knows we're watching, he won't just push back. He'll try to bury us." That night, Maya sat in her small apartment, typing a carefully worded text to Leo. She stared at the screen, then deleted it. No digital trail. She would have to meet him in person, outside rain, lashed against the glass, but inside her, a storm of a different kind was brewing, a storm of purpose, of fire, and of fear. The professor had been awakened. The judge had drawn first blood, and Maya knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was only the beginning. The cold morning light filtered through the tall arched windows of Evelyn Reed's study, striping the room in long shadows that looked like prison bars. The air was thick with the bitter scent of black coffee. Maya Singh sat across the long oak table, her body coiled with nervous energy. Spread between them was the arsenal of their burgeoning war manila folders, encrypted USB drives, printouts of financial reports, and redacted judicial memos. Each document was a breadcrumb, leading them deeper into the labyrinth of a courtroom no one had dared challenge. Evelyn, her reading glasses perched on her nose, scanned a new set of documents with the focus of a surgeon. Her expression was deceptively calm, but Maya saw the glint in her mentor's eyes, a controlled, razor-sharp fury. This, Evelyn murmured, tapping a spreadsheet, isn't just a judge skimming off the top. Croft's courtroom is operating like a predatory lender. You think he's laundering the money? Maya leaned forward. I think, Evelyn said, sitting back slowly, that we are looking at a meticulously engineered machine of judicial extortion. Look at these payment records. Dozens of cases in the last year alone. Minor infractions, traffic violations, all met with crippling fines. The defendants rarely contested. Why? Because they were funneled into a mediation program that cost more than hiring a lawyer. Maya swallowed hard. And the money goes into his judencement fund. Evelyn pointed to another sheet, which is managed by Lexwell Strategies, a ghost corporation. No physical address, no board of directors. Its only listed employee is a man named Garrett Vance. That name? It's familiar, Maya said. Evelyn nodded grimly. It should be. He was a key figure in a federal ethics probe 6 years ago. The case inexplicably went cold. And here is the master stroke. Lexwell is domiciled in a P.O. box in Delaware. It's laundering 101. A chill snaked up Maya's spine. So what is the endgame? He's building a fortune off of fines. Not just a fortune, Evelyn corrected. He's building an empire. The fines fund the court's discretionary projects. Renovations, tech upgrades, even judicial bonuses. But when the fund swells beyond the budget, the surplus becomes untraceable, unregulated, untouchable income. And who pockets it? Silas Thorne, Maya whispered. That, Evelyn said with a thin, grim smile, is the billion-dollar question, and we are the only ones asking it. A sharp knock at the door shattered the tension. Evelyn rose to answer it. On the other side stood Leo Nolan, assistant district attorney. He was wiry, sleep-deprived, and clutched a leather briefcase as if it contained a live bomb. I wasn't followed, he said, in a low voice as he stepped inside his eyes, sweeping the room like a man accustomed to searching for traps. But I parked 4 blocks away and doubled back twice. Maya gave him a tight nod of greeting. Are you sure no one at the DA's office is suspicious? If they are, Leo said, setting the briefcase on the table. I'm already a dead man. He clicked it open. Inside were confidential memos, internal emails, and several files sealed under judicial order. One bore the watermark of the State Bar's disciplinary committee. Croft has been flagging defendants in high-profile cases and diverting them to a private arbitration program he claims is for backlog mitigation. Leo explained, his voice hushed. But the program is a phantom. It doesn't officially exist. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. So where do the defendants go? To panels run by third-party firms. Firms that just so happen to be major donors to judicial re-election campaigns. And the outcomes, Maya pressed, always the same. Leo said, settlements are paid instead of facing trial. The settlements are sealed, bypassing the public record. It's all quiet, quick and clean. Evelyn's jaw tightened. How long has this been happening? Years, Leo admitted. But no one will touch him. Croft is protected. He has connections all the way up, state officials, corporate donors, even judges on the ethics board. He's untouchable. Until now, Evelyn said. But even as the words left her mouth, a cold certainty settled in her bones. This wasn't just a rogue judge. This was systemic, a machine built to consume, engineered by someone with immense vision and funded by people with everything to lose if the truth came out. Maya pulled out a flash drive. There's more. I've been working with a forensic accountant. He flagged several cases where the fines were just the beginning. In one, the defendant was a single mother with an expired registration. Croft fined her $1 of $500. When she couldn't pay, the court assigned her to a community work program. The private firm overseeing the program then billed her for administrative fees. When she missed a shift to take care of her sick child, they issued a warrant for her arrest. Leo's face went dark. So the system fines you, then charges you for the privilege of working it off, and jails you if you fail. A modern-day debtor's prison, Maya confirmed. Evelyn was silent for a long moment. She walked to her bookshelf and pulled down a worn hardcover volume, Justice and Proportionality, her own seminal work. I wrote this 25 years ago, she said softly. I believed then that the law, if wielded with empathy, could be society's moral compass. But men like Croft, they don't wield the law. They twist it into a garrote, strangling justice, while everyone else is forced to watch. She opened the book and slid a thin sheet of paper from between the pages, a handwritten list of names, dates, and connections. What is that? Maya asked. A shadow map, Evelyn said. For years I've tracked judges, lawyers, and lobbyists tied to judicial misconduct. It was all circumstantial. Unconnected dots. Croft's name connects nearly half of them. Financial ties, campaign donations, shared board memberships. I just never had the key to unlock it. Leo tapped the briefcase he'd brought. You do now? Just then, the landline on Evelyn's desk rang its shrill cry, making them all jump. No one had that number anymore. Evelyn looked at it, then at the others before answering. A male voice, flat and digitized, spoke a single sentence. Stop digging, Professor, or the next hole they dig will be for you. The line went dead. Evelyn stood motionless for a beat, then slowly replaced the receiver. She turned back to them, her voice low and hard as steel. They know we're here. Maya's hand clenched into a fist. Then let them watch. We need to leak this, Leo said, his voice urgent. But we can't just go to the press. It'll be spun, denied, and buried in a day. We need leverage. Evelyn agreed, a new dangerous idea forming in her mind. And it will require a very public risk. How public? Maya asked. Evelyn met her gaze, her eyes blazing with cold fire. We file a formal judicial misconduct complaint, on the record. With every piece of documentation we have, it will force a preliminary hearing and put Croft's name on every legal blog and government desk in the country within 48 hours. Leo's eyes widened in horror. That will make us official targets? Evelyn nodded. Yes. But it will also force the shadows to move into the light. We're no longer just investigating a judge. We're declaring war on the system that protects him. Maya looked at the table, at the files, the evidence, the lives ruined by greed. "Then let's light the match," she whispered. Evelyn smiled, a faint, chilling sight. "Good, because it's time the law remembered who it was meant to serve." Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Boston skyline. Inside the quiet brownstone, 3 minds drew their battle lines. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse office with tinted windows overlooking the world, a man closed a file labeled "Read." He picked up a secure phone. "She's coming after him," he said. After a long silence, a cold voice on the other end replied, "Then make sure she doesn't get there." The complaint landed like a bomb. It was filed on a Tuesday morning, signed in bold ink by Professor Evelyn Reed attorney Maya Singh and ADL Leo Nolan. By noon, it had been logged by the State Judicial Review Board. By sundown, an anonymous encrypted copy had been leaked to 3 of the country's most tenacious independent journalists. The document's title was as simple as it was explosive: preliminary findings on judicial misconduct, Judge Julian Croft. Within hours, the whispers turned into a roar. The name Croft, once synonymous with fear, was now stained with suspicion. The following morning, for the first time in years, his courtroom was half empty. But Judge Julian Croft did not back down. He sat even taller in his chair, his jaw set like concrete, his tone laced with ice. If his gavel struck the wood with more force than usual, it sounded less like justice and more like a declaration of war. Across town in Evelyn's brownstone, the atmosphere was anything but triumphant. The complaint had been filed, but they all knew it was only the first move in a war, and retaliation would be swift and brutal. "We've shaken the hornet's nest," Evelyn said, staring into the fireplace. "Now comes the swarm." She was right. By midnight, the attacks began. Anonymous emails flooded their inboxes with graphic threats. A skillfully manipulated video purporting to show Leo accepting a cash bribe years ago appeared online. A day later, a manufactured story surfaced on a fringe news site accusing Maya of burying evidence in a past case. Then, without warning, Evelyn's personal bank accounts were frozen. "I've had that account for 35 years, she said, holding the bank's rejection notice. "No call, no warning, just locked." Maya's face went pale. "They're not just trying to discredit us. They're trying to paralyze us." Leo slammed his laptop shut. "It's a classic playbook. First, they sever your resources. Then they assassinate your character. Then they come for your physical safety." They all knew he was right. This was bigger than Croft. Someone with immense reach and coordination was pulling the strings. The shadow puppeteer had stepped onto the stage. That evening, a frantic knock at the door changed everything. Evelyn opened it to find a terrified young woman no older than 25 standing on her porch. "You don't know me," she said, her voice trembling. "But I saw the reports. My brother, he was one of Croft's sealed cases. He was coerced into a plea deal for a crime he didn't commit. I tried to speak to a lawyer, and the next day, a black car followed me home from work." Evelyn ushered her in. The fear in the woman's eyes was raw and real. Her name was Clara Fuentes, and she handed them a USB drive wrapped in black electrical tape. "I copied it," she whispered. "My brother's public defender was one of them. He left it in his desk. He thought I was just a stupid kid. But I work in IT. I cracked the encryption." Leo plugged the drive into his laptop. Within moments, They were staring at dozens of sealed court transcripts. Many had Croft's name digitally scrubbed, but all of them bore his unique, arrogant signature on the orders. Maya gasped as she read one. This defendant, she was convicted on a minor technicality. The original file shows the arresting officer had conflicting statements. The version submitted to the court has them perfectly aligned. Leo's eyes narrowed. He was altering evidence, or having it altered for him. And then, bam, the lights in the house flickered once, twice, and died. Total darkness. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She backed away from the window, fumbling for her phone. No signal. Leo ran to the circuit breaker in the hall, only to find it had been padlocked from the outside. "We have to get out," Evelyn said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "Now. They're here." Before she could finish the sentence, the front door splintered off its hinges. Two men in black tactical gear stormed the foyer, rifle-mounted flashlights cutting through the darkness. Maya grabbed the laptop. Leo pocketed the USB drive, and Evelyn shoved open a hidden panel behind a bookshelf, revealing a narrow, dusty passage, a secret exit she'd had built decades ago after one too many death threats. The tunnel spat them out into a rain-slicked alley. They emerged into the cold silence of Boston's midnight. But the silence was shattered by the roar of a car engine. Headlights snapped on, pinning them against the brick wall. "They found us," Leo hissed. "This way," Maya yelled, darting right. "The old freight tunnels." They scrambled through a labyrinth of narrow alleys, over fences and across darkened construction sites until they found the graffiti-covered entrance beneath a stone overpass. Inside, the air was cold, damp, and pitch black. They ran for what felt like miles, guided only by the faint green glow of Evelyn's wristwatch. When they finally stopped gasping for breath, Leo checked his phone. Still dead. "We're not just targets anymore," Evelyn said, her voice echoing in the darkness. "We're a direct threat to a massive criminal enterprise." "Which means," Maya added, her voice shaking, "if we disappear tonight, the truth disappears with us." Leo's face hardened. "Not if I can help it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a second, identical flash drive. "The drive Clara gave us. I made a backup the second I plugged it in." In the oppressive darkness, Evelyn smiled faintly. "You're learning." They found refuge in a safe house owned by a retired journalist, a friend Evelyn had saved from a bogus libel suit years ago. It was small, dusty but offline and secure. There they pieced everything together: the sealed transcripts, the laundered money flowing through Lexwell Strategies, the campaign donations from arbitration firms, and the quiet, pervasive fingerprints of one man who appeared at the edge of every file, every transfer, every silenced victim: Silas Thorne, Croft's old roommate, the power broker, the architect. The moment his name became the center, the web became horrifyingly clear. He wasn't just part of the scheme. He was the spider. His network spanned 3 states with ties to judicial appointments, political endorsements, and corporate lobbying. They hadn't just stumbled upon a corrupt judge. They had stumbled upon a shadow government. Evelyn knew what they had to do. "We go public," she said, "but not to one source. We go wide. We drop everything to everyone all at once. Journalists, legal watchdogs, civil rights groups, federal prosecutors. If they want to silence the story, they'll have to silence 100 voices at the same time." "But how?" Maya asked. "We have no clean devices, no secure network." Evelyn gave a sly, tired smile. "We don't. but I know who does. The next morning, under the cover of a foggy dawn, they travelled to a fortified private studio in Cambridge. It was the headquarters of a prominent digital rights activist, a former protégé of Evelyn's. They gave her the files. She scanned them in stunned silence. "This," she whispered, looking up at them. "This isn't a story. This is a nuke." Evelyn nodded. "Then light the fuse." 12 hours later, the information detonated online. It was released simultaneously across 37 platforms, from major news outlets to encrypted blogs. An interactive timeline traced the corruption from Croft's bench to Thorne's vast network. Embedded whistleblower interviews gave faces to the victims. The public could see it all. The headlines were seismic. "Corruption in black robes, Judge Croft's empire exposed." The Reed files, a dark reckoning. When judges profit from injustice. Croft's name was everywhere. So was Evelyn's. So was Myers. So was Leo's. They had turned themselves into lightning rods. And now, the storm had arrived. Back in his chambers, Judge Julian Croft stood frozen, watching the news on a silent monitor. His images of his crimes filled the screen. His private line rang. He ignored it. It rang again. He finally answered. "You failed to contain her," a cold voice said. Croft swallowed hard. She was supposed to be a ghost by now. "No," the voice on the other end replied, devoid of all emotion. "You were." The line went dead. And in that moment, Judge Julian Croft, the man who once wielded absolute power, finally understood what it felt like to be completely, utterly powerless. And somewhere in the shadows, the man who had crowned him king began drafting a new strategy. If the professor wouldn't stop, she would have to be stopped. Permanently.